The second phone had been hidden for exactly 11 months, and in that time, Daniel had built an entire second life that Claire knew absolutely nothing about. She was sitting in the passenger seat of his car, waiting for him to come back from the gas station, when she reached into the gap between the seat and the center console for a hair tie. Her fingers closed around something hard and rectangular. She pulled it out slowly, staring at the cheap black prepaid handset in her palm, and the world as she knew it simply stopped. But to understand how she got here, sitting in a gas station parking lot at 7 in the evening with a stranger's phone in her shaking hand, we need to go back to the beginning, to the version of Claire who still believed her marriage was solid. Claire Hendricks was 36 years old and had spent the last 8 years building a life with Daniel that she was genuinely proud of. They had a 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb outside of Bristol. She worked as a senior marketing coordinator for a mid-sized consultancy. Daniel was a logistics manager who traveled a few days a week for work, or so she'd always assumed. They didn't have children yet, though they'd been talking about it more seriously over the past year. Fertility appointments had been scheduled. Savings had been discussed. She had been planning a future with this man down to the last detail. They met at a mutual friend's birthday party when Claire was 28. He was charming and attentive and made her feel, for the first time in her adult life, completely seen. He remembered small things: the name of her childhood dog, how she took her tea, which side of the bed she preferred. Her mother adored him. Her friends called her lucky. She had believed every single bit of it. The first sign that something was wrong came almost a year before the phone. It was small enough to dismiss at the time, a notification that lit up Daniel's screen while he was in the shower. She hadn't been snooping. She'd simply glanced over, the way you do when a light flashes near you. The name on the screen was Jamie from work, and the message preview read, "Can't stop thinking about last night." Claire had told herself it was probably nothing, a joke. Jamie could be a male colleague. She'd chosen not to ask. That choice would haunt her for months. Over the following weeks, small inconsistencies started accumulating like sediment. Daniel began going to the gym at odd hours, early Sunday mornings, late Tuesday evenings. He started keeping his personal phone face down on the table. He became irritable when plans changed unexpectedly, anxious in a way he'd never been before, as though he were juggling a schedule she wasn't allowed to see. When she asked how his work trips had gone, his answers were smooth and detailed. Almost too detailed, the kind of answers that felt rehearsed rather than remembered. She noticed. She said nothing. She was afraid of what saying something might cost her. Then, 6 months before the discovery, a colleague of hers named Priya mentioned offhandedly that she'd seen Daniel having lunch near the waterfront, on a day when he'd told Claire he was in Manchester for a logistics conference. Claire smiled and changed the subject. That night, she lay awake beside her husband and listened to him breathe, and told herself that Priya must have been mistaken. People mix up faces. It happens all the time. But doubt, once planted, does not stay small. She started paying attention differently after that. Not obsessively. She wasn't the kind of woman to go through someone's phone or follow them down the street. But she noticed patterns. The mileage on his car didn't always match where he claimed to have been. The hotel receipts from his work trips listed single rooms but used an unusual amount of room service for one person. His credit card showed a florist charge in March, on a day that was neither her birthday nor their anniversary. When the flowers never arrived at their home, she said nothing. She tucked it away. She collected these fragments without knowing what she was building, until the night at the gas station changed everything. And that's when she turned the phone over in her hands and realized the screen was cracked in one corner, and that it had a passcode she didn't know. Her thumbs hovered. She tried his usual PIN, their wedding anniversary reversed. It didn't work. She tried his mother's birthday. Nothing. She was about to give up when she tried the one number she'd almost forgotten, the address of the house where he grew up. It opened. What she saw in the first 10 seconds made her feel physically ill. The Messages app was open, and there were hundreds of texts, all to and from a contact saved simply as M. They went back 11 months. They were intimate, explicit, and unmistakably familiar. The kind of messages you only send to someone you've said, "I love you" to. But it wasn't just the words. It was the photographs. It was the voice notes. It was the screenshot of a bank transfer, £4,000, from an account she had never seen before, sent to someone whose last name she didn't recognize. And then she scrolled further and found something she hadn't expected at all. There was a photograph of a child. A little girl, no more than 2 years old, with Daniel's exact shade of dark brown eyes. The caption beneath it, sent from M's number, read, "She said Dada again today. She's asking when you're coming back." Claire sat in that passenger seat for exactly 4 minutes before Daniel came strolling out of the gas station with a bottle of water and a packet of crisps, completely unbothered by the universe. She watched him through the windshield. She watched the way he smiled at something on his own phone. She watched him and thought, with a clarity that surprised her, "He has no idea that I know." She slipped the second phone back between the seat and the console exactly where she'd found it. She smoothed her face into something neutral. And when he climbed into the driver's seat and handed her the water and said, "You all right, love?" She smiled and said she was fine. She had been planning what came next from the moment that car door closed. Claire did not confront Daniel that night, or the next. She understood, with a precision she hadn't known she possessed, that emotion was a luxury she could not afford yet. She contacted a solicitor the following morning, a family law specialist recommended by a friend, and was told in no uncertain terms to document everything before Daniel had any chance to move assets. She photographed every bank statement she could access. She forwarded financial records to a personal email he didn't know existed. She made note of the account number from the screenshot on the second phone. She was meticulous, and she was quiet, and she was absolutely furious. Within 3 weeks, her solicitor had discovered that Daniel had been maintaining a separate bank account for nearly 2 years. Over £23,000 had been redirected from a shared savings account they'd opened together for the family they'd been planning. He had been financially preparing to leave, just not in any way that would cost him anything. On a Tuesday evening in November, 6 weeks after finding the phone, Claire arranged for her sister to come and stay. She had already moved her most important documents, her jewelry, and 3 months of living expenses into a separate account. She had spoken to HR at her company about temporarily working from her sister's city. She had done everything she needed to do. When Daniel walked in that evening, she was sitting at the kitchen table with a single printed sheet in front of her. It was a screenshot of the photograph of the little girl with his eyes. She watched his face fall apart in real time. He tried, for a while, to explain. The words tumbled out. It was complicated. It wasn't what it looked like. He had been going to tell her. He hadn't wanted to hurt her. She let him talk. She had no interest in the explanations. She already knew the shape of the story. When he finally ran out of words and just stood there looking desperate and diminished, she slid a second document across the table. It was the legal separation agreement her solicitor had prepared. She told him he had 48 hours to make arrangements, and then she walked upstairs, closed the bedroom door, and allowed herself, finally, to cry. The divorce was finalized 9 months later. The financial settlement was significant, partly because her solicitor had found evidence of the redirected savings, and partly because Daniel, faced with the full weight of his own documentation, was not in a strong position to argue. He moved away from the area. Claire heard, through the mutual friend where they'd first met, that he was now living with Em and their daughter. She felt, when she heard this, not the devastation she'd expected, but something quieter, a kind of release. She repainted the living room herself on a Saturday morning in January. She bought the paint color she'd always wanted, and that Daniel had always overruled. She opened the windows and let the cold winter air roll through, and she stood in the middle of the room with a brush in her hand and felt, for the first time in a very long time, entirely like herself. There's a particular kind of grief in discovering that someone never fully existed in the way you believed they did. But there's also a particular kind of power in realizing you survived it, that you were sharper and steadier than the person who tried to fool you ever gave you credit for. Claire didn't need the revenge to be dramatic. She needed it to be clean. And it was. If this story hit you, make sure to like this video and subscribe. We post new stories every week, and drop a comment. What would you have done in her place?